I'm Scott, and this is Phil. Phil is joining us from Germany. I am here in Sydney, Australia. We are going to get stuck into this. So, what we're talking about today is how not to fail with putting AI into your product as a product manager, product development person. And this topic's pretty near and dear to my heart because I've personally failed putting AI into a product because I'm an engineer, software engineer by background. I love cool technology. Um, so I'm really, really excited about going through it. Phil, do you want to kick on to the next slide? So a bit more about me. I'm the founder and CEO of Terram Technologies. We're a product development firm. We're on the AFR Fast 100 2 years running. I've been involved in 61 plus major product launches. Love making sausage. Pretty jealous I'm not in Germany right now. It's one of the king premier sausage destinations in the world.
Oh yeah.
If only I could get you to send me some by email or something, I'd be, yeah, anyway, love sailing boats. Yeah, so what I want to get into next is to introduce Phil. I met Phil when Phil was giving this almost exactly the same presentation. And I really, look, it really resonated with me in that, as I said before, I have invested in AI products personally through the business. I've been involved with development of AI products, and the technologist in me, and I think the technologist in all of us, that's why we're all involved in technology, gets excited when we start talking about like deep learning, neural networks, machine learning, conversational AI, chatbots. We all start, I'm excited just thinking about it, right? But what really engaged me about Phil's talk that he's about to give to you all is that it kind of laid out a way of thinking about, in a very nice, simple framework, if you will, how to think about these new technologies and how to really commercialize them and bring them to market and provide value to your customer. So I think I'm going to hand over to Phil to take us through his talk. I'm really keen to see it, really keen to share it with everyone as well. And as always, just before I hand over to Phil, if you've got any questions, please just pop them in the chat window at any time. Pop them in the Q&A window. We might get to them when you ask them, or we may come back to them and pick them up. We'll just see how we go. It's very conversational, so really keen to get into a discussion. Looking forward to it, everyone. Over to you, Phil.
All right. Thanks, Scott. And yeah, hi everyone in Australia and all over the world. As I see, I'm super excited to be here with you to talk a little bit about how to not fail with AI in product. We've all been there. Scott, I share your passion. Also, engineer by trade. I love new shiny things. But today I want to add some padding around which cool shiny things we should add and when to avoid the many failures that I've seen over the years. In general, and this is like the big statement, software is eating the world. We all have heard that, but AI is going to eat software from Jensen, from NVIDIA, or in emojis for the new generation. That is software. AI is just waiting and waiting to get lunch. What I want to do today is pretty much discuss three things, and there will be tips along the way. I want to make it as practical as possible so that you can take something away and apply it. Hopefully, save you from some unnecessary iterations with your products. So first of all, I want to introduce the Gartner's Hype Cycle, which you can use to explore and follow emerging technologies, and then spin it into AI and show you what Gartner actually does for you to get a good understanding. Then I want to show what fundamentally are the implications of a constantly emerging set of technologies for product innovation. That's the so what. What do you as a product manager can take away from that? And then finally, how you as a product manager, product leader can decrease the risk of delivering that new shiny cool thing, which ultimately doesn't solve a problem and nobody wants to buy. So these three things, let's go through. Looking forward to the discussion as well. First of all, emerging technologies. Gartner's Hype Cycle, a very cool tool that you can use to get an understanding of what's coming. Just briefly, if you haven't seen that before, it's tracking technologies as they emerge through their life cycle, and especially in the beginning, there's some innovation trigger which puts them on the radar, and then it tends to like go into a peak of inflated expectations, where technologies are seen as the new thing, the silver bullet, solving everything, until people figure out, oh, actually, there's no business model behind it. So it gets less interesting for a matter of time. The trough of disillusionment, they call it. At that point, teams and organizations are trying to find a business model that makes use of that new technology, and then slowly getting it to the plateau of productivity, which is the equivalent of mainstream adoption. And Gartner is actually plotting all the different technologies on that hype cycle every year. One example, it's from 2013, when I was a little bit involved in 3D printing, but I think it's just so memorable, and we probably all still remember, and 3D printing was everywhere. Each household will have a 3D printer very soon. That was at the hype, at the peak of the expectation. And in the same year, a couple of months later, the first gun was made with a 3D printer. So that's one of those examples where something will happen where it's like, oh, actually, it's not the silver bullet. Okay, we have to actually figure it out. And then it went into the trough and is making its way. It's somewhere along the way of towards plateau of productivity. Now, when we look at the next year after the news, it slowly went downhill from there. We're at the same stage with deep learning, for example. I've also taken this and encourage everyone to figure it out or have a look at it. I've included the links at the bottom, and we will share the presentation and the recording so you can have a look. This is the hype cycle only for artificial intelligence. All the emerging technologies and flavors of AI on that cycle. Very cool to get your hands on. And deep neural networks or deep learning, it was at the peak, I think last year, where it was the silver bullet, and slowly it's being realized, oh, there were a few failures because business model thinking was not applied yet. However, each of these technologies on the hype cycle, you can figure out what that actually means for you. You don't need to be an engineer. Don't get scared by mathematical models or deep learning or the buzzwords. There are great resources online to get you the understanding that you need. For example, for deep learning, what you have to understand is, how does a natural or neural network evolve? They're there to perform a task, but then humans are required to find edge cases and to train the models. And that's expensive. So from a product management point of view, you need to understand what are the opportunities, what is actually required to build those models. So it's not a build it, deploy it on a server and let it run and that's it. There is a lot of work required. You have to figure out what are the tasks that my AI should do, to then figure out and not overinvest into things that are just cool but don't even don't really solve a problem. So really recommend watching that video that is linked there to get a better understanding. So my first tip in that section, you don't need to be an AI engineer to understand emerging technologies, their limitations and opportunities. Don't get scared. Don't think, oh, this is all too complex. It's actually quite easy to understand the opportunities and what can be achieved, and to skill up enough to have a conversation with your colleagues.
And this is kind of in my view, it almost becomes a benefit to not be really deep technically on what's there, because it can really inhibit you by being so close to the technical side, in terms of like really if you're not super deep on these topics, being able to ask the right questions, but also being able to focus it back on, well, hey, I don't understand the technology, but like what does that mean, and where's it at, and how's it going to be useful? That's actually kind of the right question to be asking, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of the situations, if you come from an engineering background into product management, you have exactly that problem, and I'm there as well, to force myself not to go too deep. Benefit for if you were a designer before, or a business analyst, and go from that track, that's a lot more intuitive, because good news, you don't need to take the AI course on Coursera and do a degree, because as a product manager, your job is to get the right people together to solve the most valuable problems, not to actually code anything up yourself. And understanding the workings to a level that you need to do your job is actually a lot easier than many think. So watch the video. It's 1.5 hours of your life, but you'll get a complete overview of the state of the art this year. It's awesome. So now that we've established that new technologies do appear, and they will continue, and faster and faster, what does that actually mean for product innovation, which the product managers are responsible for? Sooner or later, they will influence the product of the future by changing the solution space. And I want to take a bit of time to actually explain what that means. What is the solution space? When do you use the solution space? But this is one of the things. I think every product, every technology product, will some way, shape, or form have to do with AI, or will be benefiting from an AI application, because the solution space expands. So very comprehensive graph that I've put together. There's a solution space with current technologies, and as emerging technologies enter the picture, that solution space grows. So what can we do with that then? A larger solution space allows for better solutions to known and new problems, or better solution to new problems, and to known problems, and solutions at all to new problems that appear. As an example, let's assume we have 5 problems that we're aware of and that we've already identified to be valuable. In our current solution space, we might know that we can tackle problem 1. All the others are not viable, not feasible yet with the technology available. But as the solution space expands, we can and should have an eye on what problems can we tackle with the latest technologies. What are the opportunities to deploy technologies that are emerging to solve customer problems? That's the question we need to ask. So in this case, assuming we have now the new, bigger solution space, we can solve problem 1, 2, and 3. Problem 4 and 5 are still outside of those boundaries, so we need to wait a little bit more for the technology to evolve further. Now, also one thing that I want to mention is that as you solve new problems that weren't solvable before, that might introduce new problems by themselves. So for example, you invent a printer, an inkjet cartridge printer, and then one of the follow-up problems will be, oh, the cartridges are pretty expensive for many people. They don't like that. That's a customer problem. If you can foresee that, you might say, okay, that's problem 6. I'll solve that straight away. You're the first to market for refillable cartridges or aftermarket cartridges. So there's opportunities, not specifically by deploying the new technologies, but by understanding from a product management point of view what the implications are. So you might. Yeah.
And Phil, where does the boundaries for the problem space or solution space come? You know, are you drawing that from the vision for the product, or is it something else?
Right. So, and I went the easy route here. Like, here are the 5 problems that we've already identified.
Yeah.
Got me. No, the important bit is it ultimately links back to the strategy. You have a product strategy that is embedded in your market strategy and the business strategy as a whole. And as you identify problems or things that your customers need to do, but either can't or really hate right now because the solutions are inadequate, one thing before you even think about the solution is to link it back to the strategy. Does it make sense? Because just because you can solve a problem doesn't mean you should. Because it needs to be embedded with all the operations that you have in your organization right now. And it needs to align with the product vision, and depending on how much control you have over the roadmap, it either needs to fit in within the roadmap that you're working on, or you need to see if it makes sense to put it on the roadmap. Yeah,
So
probably.
it's a bit of
Yeah.
and it sounds like it almost feels like it's also a bit of a iterative process, as in you're like, here's the space, here's a problem, does that fit, is it slightly in, is it slightly out? So you kind of, it's not a set and forget, you're working on it as you go, with as problems come up. You know, maybe they expand the space a bit because maybe they're really cheap and you could do something before that you couldn't.
Yeah.
Or maybe they just don't fit the value to the customer or the problem.
Yeah, and to me that's the true meaning of being agile, and being able to monitor the market trends and needs, and to bring it back and see if that fits into your strategy and change it. Like,
Yep.
You can, yeah, your business, your products evolve with the market and with the technologies that are available. Yeah, I agree. So fundamentally, new technologies simply let you solve problems in new ways that weren't possible before, either in completely new ways or in better ways. The main thing that I want to, and I'll probably mention it one or two more times, you can focus on the problems. That is, as a product manager, find the right problems, do the right things, because the easiest way to waste a lot of money is by letting engineers and data scientists solve the wrong problems, because they will find great solutions, but well, in the end, that won't matter too much. So focus on existing problems that are underserved or new problems that emerge with the technology advancements, and understand the opportunities there, and build your business case from that starting point before you go into solution design and coming up with prototypes and products and solutions. And that is my segue to the third bit of decreasing risk. In the end, we are, as product managers, we're trying to predict the future. If we were certain with that, we probably wouldn't be product managers, but lotto players. So there's always an element of risk involved. And there are a few steps that help you decrease that risk and increase your confidence and certainty of launching something that is successful. And there, I want to introduce 3 steps that we can all go through that hopefully help some of you avoid the pitfalls. So it all starts with a quick reminder of what is the ultimate purpose of product management. It's to create customer value and deliver measurable business benefits for your business. It's not to launch the most hype new technologies as soon as possible because we can, and we want to show that we're smart, and it's awesome. That's part of the fun.
Phil, that's what I thought it was all about. I'm leaving.
That's what I got in for. No,
I'm out of the industry. I'm out. You've now killed my career. Bummer. Okay.
Sorry. No, but it's of course it's a bit yeah.
I agree with your statement. I agree with your statement. It's all about like customer value, technologies, the fun way of getting there, in my view.
Yeah, absolutely. And being involved and actually being able to shape the future, that's the fun of product management. But with the awareness of always bringing it back to solving real customer needs, customer problems that create value, not just for the customers, because if you only do that, your customers will be super happy. But if you forget the business side, then your funding will run out, and then your products will have to be discontinued, and then no one is happy. So these 2 things you need to balance. And then, unfortunately, many customers or many companies that I've seen without mature product teams or without a mature implementation of a framework or product-led mindsets tend to jump to solutions, because that's what we're wired to do. That's what our brain is wired to do, which is awesome from an evolutionary point of view. Not so awesome if there's investment behind and trying to deliver something. So I call it sometimes the IIH framework: ideate, implement, and hope that something sticks. And as with everything, you might just be lucky. So you have a new solution space, you see all the new opportunities, chatbots and AI, deep learning, neural networks, voice recognition, speech to text, all of that. You can create a whole range of solutions from that. But if you go from ideation to implementation straight away, you need to hope that you are lucky. And I prefer to not try to gamble to success, but to actually reduce the risk of being wrong as much as possible by going through the process. So what very often happens is that one of the solutions that you came up with, or one of the massive feature set that you came with, is actually valuable. So one of them makes money and makes you happy, all the others make you question your choices and make you feel nauseous ultimately, because you saw the investment, the money is just flying out the door, but no return in there. And ultimately, again, you're responsible for customer value and business benefits. So very important, successful PMs don't use emerging technologies to come up with the new solutions. That's not your job. It's fun to be involved there, but your primary value that you can add is to use emerging technologies to understand business opportunities and search for valuable problems that you can now solve with the new tech.
And I think even for the folks that are listening in that are not product managers, but are involved in product development in any form, this is exactly the way that you can really add value to your team or to, you know, whatever you're doing, because it's often the thing that's missed is like really understanding what's the opportunity and the problem that we're trying to solve.
Yeah, and that's actually a very good point. A lot of times I've noticed over the years that people don't necessarily have to have the title of product manager. If you are, as part of your job, doing something like problem validation or coming up with concepts, doing research, business analysts a lot of times, you are basically playing in the product management discipline. So this all applies very much to you. You don't need to have the title of product manager to help your team succeed. So yeah, good comment, Scott. So good thing is if you have a process. If not, I encourage to think about if you can adopt something. My following slides are adopted from a product management framework that I teach at BrainMates, if you know them. But any framework, any process is helpful to really mindfully go through the steps to reduce the risk. And I've mentioned 3 steps here. Step 1 is the problem discovery. It starts with finding problems that indicate underserved needs of your target customers. Because as a product manager, as we said before, you don't have to come up with the winning idea all the time. You don't have to come up with the final solution. That's what the team that you pull together is doing. What you have to do is validating that you are solving valuable problems for your customers.
Hey, and I'll let you keep going.
Okay. So as you go into those ideation sessions, or people tell you their ideas, when you hear that, oh, let's use deep learning to identify something, let's utilize a chatbot to help with whatever it is, oh, we should create AI to revolutionize the way something, take it with a grain of salt, because that's the hype cycle bingo. It's like, yes, at the peak, but take that as a starting point to understand what is the problem that lies underneath. Why do people now think we should use deep learning, chatbots, AI to solve which problem? And that's the work that you can then have.
And I think that the key thing I want to call out, which is sometimes hard to see unless you've really been through it, is what really stands out for me with what Phil's sharing with everyone, is that we haven't really spoken about in detail. If you notice, like, Phil's not talking about an evaluation of the deep learning frameworks and which one's better for your product. He's not talking about that. And Phil, like, you're not talking about the benefits of chatbots, whether they work or not. We're not talking about that. And that's kind of the key here. And almost like mentioning those sounds strange, but if you want to make AI work, mentioning those words is almost a bad thing. And doing that kind of analysis is kind of where people go wrong. And I think that's the key message that I took away from this presentation, and that I hope everyone picks up on, because I'm sure some of you would have joined this webinar being like, great, I'm going to learn about whether deep learning works or not. I don't know. But the key is to step back and not get into that. That's the easy bit in a way to do. Like, it's very hard in a lot of ways, but
Yeah.
like it's emotionally easy to do
Yeah.
that is what I'm saying. Not intellectually or technically, but it's emotionally easy. It's much harder to say, whoa. Let's not talk about deep learning for a second, and let's try and talk about what the benefit is. That ends up being emotionally difficult, requires patience, all that kind of thing. I think that's just what I want to kind of share with this slide, because that's the important bit to me.
Yeah, and I can't stress the importance of everything you've just said enough. It is so hard because again, naturally we jump to a solution, we jump to a conclusion, and one of the most valuable skills for product managers, bring it back, like analyze what is the underlying problem. Is it big enough? Is there a big enough market that would benefit from it? As you said, when I think about it, it's in the early stages, I constantly have to force myself to not think about the solution, because in the end, when you think about it, a customer doesn't care whether which algorithm, which model of AI you deployed to get them the value that they need. They have a problem, they want it solved. If they had a choice, they wouldn't buy your product at all. If the problem would disappear, fine. They don't want to. They don't care. We care a lot because it's fun and we love technology. So really forcing yourself out of that mindset and start with the problem, it's hard. It's easy to say, it's hard to do. So yeah, taking that out of here is, I think, the main key point that I would like to do. Because in the end, otherwise, something like that happens. Everyone is excited. Deep learning, that was from 2018. Your stakeholders are excited. You are excited. Everyone is excited. You found the silver bullet. Let's and media tells you, oh, this is the future. Every product will have deep learning stuff. But then even Gartner, in their analysis, said, like, once you shift through the hype, you will realize that businesses are pushing for these deep learning solutions without even understanding how they apply to their current initiatives. So they even recommend businesses, and in this case product managers, to take the time and to learn the spectrum of options, because only then you can appropriately address business problems, or in the B2C world, customer problems. That's the first step. Otherwise, you need to be lucky, which unfortunately very often is not the case. So going beyond the hype, understanding the fundamental benefits of the technology before creating an initial solution concept. There's actually 4 questions that you can always ask. And if you find yourself not having instant answers to these, you've gone too far into the solution space. You need to take yourself back. So what problem does it solve? And is that a valuable enough problem? Meaning, is it either not solved at all, or is it solved in a way that makes people annoyed at the solution that is in place? And then, who are the people who are experiencing that problem? And is the market, is the number of these people who are willing to buy something big enough to even give it a shot in coming up with a solution? And only then, if you have answers to that, if you think, yes, we found a valuable problem that we want to pursue, that's where you go into step 2 or phase 2 in the solution design, where you bring a team together and immerse them into the market and business requirements. And that team then discovers a solution that is desirable, viable, and feasible. And I think we've heard that before. So customer desirability is step 1. Is whatever we do desirable to the customer? And back to your point earlier, Scott, whatever the solution is, it doesn't matter. Because I can, from the very beginning, say, if I found a problem, then I know what the benefit is if I solve it somehow. And if that benefit is high enough for my customer, I know it's desirable. If the problem is bad enough for my customer, I know it's desirable. at this point, I don't have to think about a solution yet.
And it kind of gives you the parameters for your solution as well. Like
Yeah,
the pain that they experience, the desirability that they have is going to give you the box for how much you
yeah,
can invest, how you're going to tackle it with them, all that kind of gives you the frame.
yeah. And it's important actually, because mentally make that a hard frame. Because if you define, okay, this is the problem we want to solve, and then you deploy new technology and you figure out what it can all do, then very often what happens is, yes, it can solve the problem you had. And then comes engineering, is like, you know what it also can do? This, and that. And then as a product manager, not getting sucked into the excitement, I was like, oh yeah, because you can retrofit any problem to that. It's like, oh yes, it solves the problem and it can do this and this. Then you have two options. You either say, yeah, cool, you make up a problem for that you can also solve, or you say, let's focus on the problem that we have identified, solve that first, and look at the rest later. It's an iterative approach. These are the options. Importantly, what I want to show in this is customer value lives in the desirability, and customer value you should identify in the first stage, in first place. All the AI stuff lives in viability and feasibility. So as we've seen, it's actually expensive to create deep neural networks and iterate them based on the inputs and the data that is coming in. And then technical feasibility is then where engineering can have a look, do engineering spikes, figuring out what is possible precisely. Like you as a product manager have kind of the solution space, but at this point, before you start implementing a solution, you will invest a little bit in figuring out the specifics and the details.
And how do you think about with AI in particular, there's this problem of, you got to research the customer need, which you're going to get your box. But then you've also with AI, it's kind of not like modern software development where, modern software development, you say, all right, we've researched customer need. If we think it through, then we can address it with these costs and these benefits. Whereas with AI, say it's like, oh, we think AI can drop the price of this product by 20, 30%, or the cost of collecting data by, $19 from 20 to 1, down to $1. But then you got this problem of, well, but we don't actually know if, like, maybe it gets it to $1, but maybe it can only get it to 10. And I think you then got to also be researching on that side and marrying it up with, well, is that acceptable to customers if they can only get it down to $10? Or does it really need to get down to $1? And I think autonomous driving is another good example where, like that you got to put in all the research to see where you can get it to, whilst people are kind of saying, well, no, that death that Uber had isn't acceptable. And you're
Yeah.
balancing the two things. So I'm really curious about how you mix that, in your view, into this.
Mm-hmm. I think you've mentioned one specific element that I would start with, and there's like a bit of scenario analysis. Would customers be okay at this level, at that level, at this level?
Yeah.
Which then gives you an indication of certainty. Again, we will deal with uncertainty, but if you think about well, in an example, the Apple Newton first handwriting recognition. So if you want to do something like that again, you have a lot of insight if you say, okay, 50% accuracy is fine versus 99% accuracy is fine. That immediately gives you an understanding of how much uncertainty, how much risk is involved.
Yep.
In the end, your business case will be about risk and benefit.
So it's kind of interesting because I like that idea of the scenarios, because you actually, and almost like taking it further, is you actually end up with multiple problems that seem like the same problem, but they're actually different customer problems. Like, so customer problem or benefit or whatever, like what customer value one is $10 okay? Customer value two is $1 okay? But they're completely different things that have a completely different impact on the business model, the solution, etc., etc.
Yeah, and figuring out what that means from a customer discovery point of view. It's different market segments. And what I would then do is find the market segment that is most probable to be serviceable with the new technology. So start with the ones who are fine at $10, like just bringing it down 50%, that's fine. And then understanding how many of these are there. And because if you do that, you know what kind of the benefit is that you can create, and that gives you like a cost ceiling. And then go into the conversations with your engineers, do a spike. Yes, it will cost money, but it's to the product manager who makes sure that the business case is still it's sensible. No one is expecting us to predict the future with 100% certainty. So failure is an option, but then it's up to us to define what failure means. To me, it's like we need to learn as fast as possible, as cheap as possible. That doesn't mean that it's always cheap. What that does mean, though, is especially if we think about AI, the market opportunity often needs to be big, often bigger than we would like. And just having a hard stance on business metrics and a business case that makes sense helps with that. But it's where sometimes art and science mix a little bit.
Yep.
So yeah, going back, what are the problems? What are the customer segments? What is the customer segment that I want to target first? Is it big enough? And then go from there. Once you serve these, you can always iterate your algorithms to make it cheaper and cheaper, or try to make it cheaper and cover more ground with different segments. So briefly, thinking about what we've shared before, like solution one, suddenly money is gone, and going into this as well. What I've seen happening before a couple of times is that product managers are surprised that suddenly the product stops working. So everything looked fine. They did user testing in the beginning, sharing the benefits and getting positive feedback. Yeah, that's awesome. We want this. They built it. They built a first version. Launched it, people signed up, or people started to buy it. The product manager happy, celebrating, and then a year later, customers are gone, money is gone, and the PM feels sick again. So what sometimes happens here, or in this case, very often, is that the value promise wasn't delivered. So in the end, you need to provide value. If you create value to your customer segments, your product will be successful. And value, very simple, benefits minus cost. Costs are not just the money that people pay. Costs are like upskilling, training, any kind of effort. And that is what often, especially in AI products, where data is so important, is a big challenge. So one of the issues that I want to highlight here is like what I call the data accuracy threshold, where in order to get the benefits that were promised to me as a customer, the product needs my data input, or needs some kind of data input to make it relevant to me. So data accuracy requires data input. Data input is effort, so I need to do it, and effort is perceived cost. So I need to invest my time and effort into a product that is promising a specific return. If that time is too long, that's where I might churn. So as a product manager,
as a customer, you're saying as a customer, I need to get my data in there in order to get value, and that's a really high churn risk.
Yeah, exactly. So the more customer information you need to feed into your AI algorithms, for example, the more likely it is that you will never get there. It's a little bit like going to the gym. Like the promise is you're healthy and fit, and you build up, you get into shape, but you actually need to do a lot of work before you get there. And the engagement and the user experience aspect is of like critical importance there. You can have the most beautiful algorithms in the world, but if the UX is lacking to get the people to enjoy the initial onboarding process, where they need to put in the data and maintain the data so that the AI has a chance to crunch it and learn with the customers, that's definitely something that is the churn risk, and which might be the end of the product if you never cross that accuracy threshold.
And it's not just perceived cost, it's real cost. Like for some of these, for some applications of AI, the volume of data, and not just the volume, but like the way it's got to be massaged, all that kind of thing is just not just perceived, but a very real and insurmountable cost.
Yep. Yeah, and all of that should be, from a product management point of view, needs to be part of your business plan or your business case that you make. Understanding your customers, as you immerse yourself, understand how much time are they willing to spend. Is it okay if they get a $10 discount but only need to spend 20 minutes on setting everything up? And then like the scenario analysis is just getting more complex, but that's then the hard work that we need to do to reduce the risk. And in this case, so if, and I did it in capital letters, if a solution was found during the solution discovery after we already identified a valuable problem, then you can implement and launch the product or the feature. But again, take into consideration the constant iteration. It's very often that the first version is not really hitting the product market fit. And it is likely that it needs to increase solution accuracy, especially with AI and deep learning, for example. Once you release it to the real world, into the market, that's where real data will come in. So you need to invest in tagging the data and making sure to eliminate use cases or edge cases that break the value promise. So in your business case and the investment, like make sure that your stakeholders know that additional investment will be needed. It's not a set and forget after launch. So my third tip here is validate the problem before defining the solution, and remind yourself. You will find yourself in solution space. Bring yourself back by asking, do we know what problem does it solve, and who has the problem, and are there enough of them? And understand or make sure that you not only focus on the technology, but also on the user experience as a holistic approach to product management, because there is a risk of churn in the beginning until they have enough data, or until your product has gathered enough user input or data from the company or from the individual to make accurate predictions or whatever the task is that you do for the customer.
And just on a, I guess, really tactical tip that I've seen here is this is where often with AI products, like a professional services component, if you're building something with AI, having a professional services or a person component where you're kind of going in and doing it for them, because it reduces the perceived cost of, and also just increases the simplicity and ease of saying yes, as in, hey, we're going to come in and we'll get the data ready for you. We'll get it right so that the model is working. Seems to be, at the moment anyway, a good combo on this front, because a lot of organizations aren't ready, don't want to see a lot of risk in getting the data right.
Yeah, and to me, that's a good understanding of your customer segment again, where time is valued more than the money spent on someone externally because of the uncertainty. Do we get it right? Like we have to invest into staff hours to prepare the data, or we can just pay someone and we know it's the right thing. But even building further up on that notion of getting a service aspect in there, during the solution design phase, as we make assumptions of what would work, what kind of solutions, how would the accuracy level be needed, you can actually test that out without AI by concierging it. So similar to, I think most of the big chat platforms have started by saying they have chatbots and chat AI, but actually they just had people answering. And then they gave instructions to the people of like, okay, how good need the answers to be before people like disengage or don't like it anymore? And that gave them the insight on what the accuracy level needs to be.
And I think this is the the dirty secret of every AI startup ever founded in the last 5 to 10 years is actually there's an army of people behind their company, right? Like, but hey,
Yeah.
you got to do it like that. That's you're doing discovery, and I think that highlights as well your point around the cost, or I think we spoke like the cost of AI products is actually high, and even the discovery is higher because you need an army of, I don't know, maybe it's uni students who are sitting there responding to chat messages in order for you to test out the value prop.
Yeah. Or yeah, if you find a problem and you think you can solve that with smart AI, just doing it yourself, because in the end it's an automation, or very often it's an automation of a service delivery model. Like, give me your data, I'll do some analysis, and I'll tell you something about your business or about your staff or about something. You normally can do that somehow manually, but AI just lets you create a solution that is 10, if not 100 or 1,000 times better, faster, more productive, more efficient. And that's where the value is being created. Yeah, and that gets me to the end of my presentation here. So key takeaways: understand the fundamental fundamental benefits of technologies, of emerging and proposed technologies before creating solution concepts. Solution concepts have they're important, but even more important is to understand the problems and how technology might help with benefits. So understanding the opportunities that new technologies can provide. Always focus on customer value and business benefits as a product manager. You do that by identifying the underserved needs of your target customers. Know your target customers, know how many of these there are, know their problems, know what other solutions are there or alternatives. Very often, don't forget the don't do anything alternative, which is always there. There's an inertia. So understand the problems and how severe those problems are. How willing are people to change their behavior, to pay for a new solution, and pay special attention to data accuracy thresholds and the time to value, because that's the part where you might lose them over time. So try to reduce that time until you can provide some form of value to your customers, so that they get stuck on your product and it gets better.
And just to add to the data accuracy, is I think that the data accuracy threshold is also important for the cost, like purely from a business model point of view, is like how much data, how many people, and how many iterations with your data science team, and how real time do your models have to be. All that kind of stuff starts, the cost just gets higher and higher and higher and may become prohibitive. So I think it's really important to understand that as well. Yeah. As you highlighted with the deep learning example, kind of the number of teams that might be needed and the amount of data tagging and the amount of human cleaning of data just starts to make things difficult. And it might even be, I mean, on data accuracy, I've seen situations where like the data is just, when you look at it, it seems good on a strategic level. Oh, we've got, data on everyone's purchase habits in a particular category. A transaction data is a good one. Oh, we've got all the transactions, but then when you dig into the information that's actually tagged on a transaction, on a credit card transaction, you don't know what they've bought. You don't know who they've bought it from. And if you try and match it up, you end up matching it to the wrong business. So all of a sudden you think they're buying something that I think that's a really big, data accuracy is a huge part of the business case from what I've seen.
And it reminds.
You go.
Yeah, it reminds me of the same hype cycle model, like your what you just said. Like, we have all the credit card transaction.
The data hype cycle.
Then someone tries to do it's like, oh, actually, devil is in the details. So everyone is getting disappointed.
Yeah. Turns out credit card data isn't that useful because it's essentially meaningless.
Yeah.
No, I've got a question for you. We'll throw it to Q&A in a moment. Just everyone, if you've got questions for Phil, please kind of start shooting them through with the Q&A panel or the chat panel. I have a question for you, Phil. which is who's responsible for monitoring the technology that's coming through? You know, you mentioned it's the product manager, but you know, I've seen it's the CTO's responsibility.
Yep.
Who takes this on in an org chart in your view? And I won't accept an answer of it's everyone's responsibility, because that often means nothing happens. So I'm
Yep.
really keen about your opinion of where it sits best.
So I do firmly believe that it's first and foremost, the CTO needs to be up to date on what is the technology, what can it be used for, how, like, to a level of detail that is technical. Because as a product manager, I rely on my CTO to help me understand what's possible, what is the envelope of the solution. Then on to a lesser degree, I'm responsible to be able to talk to my CTO in a meaningful way. So getting a certain level of understanding, so that I'm not asking, hey, what's possible? I get an answer and it's all blank and I don't understand it. But if I had to choose one, which I think would not really help. So CTO, yes, absolutely. If you as a product manager don't look into these and are not responsible for it, then you're at the kind of at the mercy of your CTO, and you need to believe whatever he or she thinks and believes. But knowing that that's an engineering mindset. Engineers like the shiny stuff. Engineering like the new things. They want to work on the latest bits. So I think it is a shared responsibility but different parts of accountability. Accountability for understanding business opportunities with the product management side, accountability for understanding technology feasibility on the engineering side, which then later on
Cool.
in the solution design comes together.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. I like the distinction, responsibility and accountability. Yeah, I like it. Just any other questions anyone has? We'll wait another minute, see if anything comes through, and then if not, we'll start saying goodbye. I have one while we're waiting.
Yeah, cool.
Having kind of said AI, here we go. Here's one from my question can wait. Here's one from Hasnain. I hope I got that right. Can you give your own example of how you've done this in Practera, or maybe another? You could give another example. It's up to you. I don't.
And by this, you mean all of that?
Any other questions? We don't know much about Practera as a product, so maybe you could give a quick kind of what Practera is, and then explain where you've used it or not. I know you've used it in previous this framework of yours in previous companies as well. So over to you.
Yeah. So very briefly about Practera, it's an education technology company, and we're developing an experiential learning platform which helps university educators or education institutions, teachers to run experiential learning programs and courses, meaning that students can learn by doing. This is a very complex endeavor because it normally has students and employers and universities or training providers collaborating somehow, and it's a huge administrative overload to ensure that to quality assure the experiences, to ensure that the students have the learning that they need. And we developed tools and AI to detect what's happening in those experiences and provide recommendations to educators how to intervene, when to intervene, and focus their attention on the elements that need their attention. That will then allow them to run larger cohorts, providing more access to this high quality education to more students, and that's what we develop. How we deploy it is exactly how what we discussed. So being in constant conversation with the CTOs, understanding what technology is there, how does it evolve, what are the problems that we haven't solved yet, and my job is to really identify the valuable problems.
What's a specific problem that you could kind of share, where, like an example where you've applied an emerging technology? Yeah.
So for example, we do a lot of work with reflections. So as part of their feedback cycles, students reflect on what was the situation, what happened, and how can I improve, or how did that improve my skills. Those reflections are often lengthy. And if you have a course with 2,000 students, reading through all these reflections is a big time investment. So there are AI tools to understand sentiment, for example, of all the submissions. So if we detect negative sentiment somewhere, we say, educators, hey, maybe look there first. If you have a limited amount of time, start here. So that helps them to focus. We do have algorithms in place that analyze how team dissonance happens over time. So as teams work together on a business project, for example, it's impossible for educators to understand the team dynamics. But it is not impossible for AI to understand team dynamics based on the data points that are gathered from students going through and working collaboratively.
Like number, you can look at like number of interactions, sentiment, and you can kind of say like those with more interactions get better results, those with less get.
Yes, and yeah, we're working with universities, researchers to really dig into these data points. What are the data points we have? What are the data points we need? And how can we use that to inform and recommend interventions to educators?
Awesome. And so that's cool. Looks like we answered that question. Next one is, Phil, how have you gone about encouraging customers to provide data? And I might while you're thinking of an answer, one comes to mind for me in that I have seen people give away free apps. I think we've all seen that with some of those facial apps that have gone around. I know of an Australian startup that built a video watching app in order to gather data around video consumption, because they knew that Google and YouTube weren't going to hand over their usage data sets. So they just built a free app to watch videos on. And they even went and got free licenses to videos so that they could get, they went and engineered a situation where people could watch a video in Australia that they couldn't see elsewhere. So they're able to get data. I've seen a lot of that, giving something. Google's a really good example with they have given things over for free to governments in order to get transport data to make Google Maps more effective. So this kind of like giving something for free to get the data is a big trend I've seen. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Phil, maybe on different situations.
Yeah, bringing it back to the equation, that you want to create value, and it's benefit minus cost. Money is one aspect of the cost. So if you, and your example of Google, like if they calculate, okay, how can we maximize the value, is, all right, we have this benefit that we promise, but we can't really prove it because we first need the data and so on and so on. So it's somewhat lower in the beginning. That means we need to keep the cost as low as possible as well. Providing the data is already cost, because the internal processes, the privacy impact analyses, and all the things that need to happen, that's cost already. And then it's a calculation or a calculated guess on, can we charge for it or not? So that's number one. Giving something away for free minimizes your cost block so that your value increases as much as possible. That's one. The second one I find very important, and unfortunately often not, I don't see that deployed too often, is really think about the customer perspective. Because as AI products are developed, it's kind of obviously we need the data first, and then you get all your benefit. And how the products are designed then is to optimize for data input. Whereas I'm of the belief that you need to think about the fact that people don't want to do that. So develop every step, every single click in that initial piece will be if you need something from them, and the click is something. Typing in.
And I've even seen just on that one, like on that design front, some I guess tactics I've seen is to you actually put data in that's kind of like good enough to get it going.
Yeah. Oh, good enough, and then getting people to fix something up that is not really
yes, yeah.
Much easier than asking them to
It kind of plays into that human thing of like, oh, it's wrong, I've got to do something about it, kind of.
Well, one of the tactics I use in product management all the time as well. Like if you need information from somewhere in your business, don't go out and ask, "Can you give it to me?" Come up with your best guess and ask if that's correct. You're much more likely to get someone to say, "No, that's all wrong. Here's
Yeah.
what the right thing is." Like, thank you very much.
Reverse psychology. All right. So next question is, can you
actually, I just see Javen, and I absolutely agree. I wanted to mention that as well. Data privacy is of utmost importance, and it will become more important as we go along. So there is a fourth element that I think will make its way into product management principles. It's desirability, viability, feasibility, and efficacy, ethical product management. Because yes, you can trick people into providing their data to you, but it's always your choice. So as I would encourage any product manager, stay away from the black hat tactics and make sure that you use the data ethically. You make sure that they're safe, and you make that a priority. At Practera, we have a whole role to think about that, to make sure that student data is secure, is safe, and we're investing heavily in that as well. Because I think it's a big part of it.
Hey, we're a bit over, so I'm just going to take just this last question from Hiranga, which is, can you give an example of timeframes to develop a particular machine learning process, say image recognition with X number of images in a database? Just trying to understand how long these things take. My initial reaction is 2 years. Just if I had to go purely off experience, it'd be nice to say faster. I know people can code things up in 3 months, but by the time you've understood the problem, done some research, kind of got the funding together, got the team together, just very pragmatically, I'm thinking already then done enough iteration on the data and the models, you're already at that's a year gone easily. It pains me, and I see the tears thing, kind of pains me to hear that kind of time frame. On the flip side, I'm a big believer in do stuff rapidly. So Phil, would love your thoughts as well.
Yeah, to come up with the final thing that again, I want to mention that in your answer you have applied a certain level of expected accuracy. It's very hard to answer it generically, because there might be a customer segment, very early adopter, who like to just see sometimes working, and that's faster. There are a lot of libraries that can do a lot of the standard things. So it depends, how custom do you need it to be? Do you need to develop it from scratch? Is it a common use case that you can use?
That's a really good point. Is in common use cases, there's so much off the shelf stuff now that you don't even need to do any training. You just, if you're trying to detect whether the photo's a hot dog or not a hot dog, then for the Silicon Valley fans in the audience, you can just grab it. The question is, where's the good place? Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, they all have really, really strong, they've all got great but different machine learning and AI offerings that you can just kind of plug and play. And there's plenty of other companies as well. Look, that's all we got time for today. Phil, thank you so much for your time.
Absolute
Love
pleasure.
that. I'm actually thinking about playing some. You've reminded me of the Hype Curve Bingo game. I'm actually thinking about playing some of that in some situations. You've
Yeah,
reminded me of it, so I'm going to give that a shot. Thank you so
awesome.
much. Thank you to our audience. Yeah, speak to you all next time, and do go on the website, pump your email into terum.com.au, because we're running more sessions like this all the time. We love chatting with really experienced folks like Phil in the product community, hearing about their insights, and let's stand on the shoulders of giants together. Great. Bye, everyone.
Love it. Thanks for having me. Thanks everyone for joining, and
Bye.
keep in touch.